Marshall Peak, Chapter 1778, Meeting Luo Lan Again. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Pew Pew Lasergun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. Is it useful? Yang Kai asked. Although he felt that his idea should be feasible, using a Space Force mark to sense the existence of void cracks, in the end, was a newly formulated secret technique he was using on another person, so he was not completely confident. It's useful, very useful. Guizhou nodded repeatedly. This old master can feel all the surrounding void cracks now. There are 3 hidden cracks nearby, right? Yang Kai nodded and smiled. It seems that there is nothing wrong with this idea. Yeah, this old master won't run into any problems anymore. But, are you sure you'll have no problems on your own? Guizhou asked worriedly. Most of the people who entered here were Origin Kings, with only Zhu Yue and Zi Dong being Origin Realm cultivators, but those two would definitely be following Ni Guang and Zi Long respectively. If Yang Kai was alone, he would need to bear some great risks to act here, and if he encountered any masters, he would be vulnerable to attack. This made Guizhou somewhat nervous. There's no problem, Yang Kai grinned. Supreme Elder hasn't forgotten what power I am proficient in, right? There are so many void cracks here that this place is simply tailor-made for me. If I encounter some aggressive fool, even if I cannot defeat them, I can still run. Hearing what he said, Guizhou also agreed and nodded. Good, in that case, we'll act separately, but you must still remain vigilant. I will leave something with you as well. As long as you and I are within a few thousand kilometers, I will be able to perceive your location if you stimulate it, and I will rush over to assist. As Guizhou spoke, he waved his 10,000 soul banner, reached into it, and pulled something out. The next moment, a yin soul roared eerily as it was handled by Guizhou. This yin soul looked incredibly terrifying and had clear facial features while also exuding an extremely powerful aura. This aura was just as strong as an ordinary third-order origin returning realm cultivators. This is the vice soul of this old master's 10,000 soul banner and has a direct link to this old master's soul. For now, I'll leave it with you. Guizhou stretched out his hand and placed the yin soul on Yang Kai's shoulder. The next moment, Yang Kai felt a hint of coldness coming from his shoulder, but it did not affect him much. After a quick scan to confirm the yin soul was attached to his body, Yang Kai nodded slightly to indicate that everything was in order. Now, all that was left to do was wait for the 7-colored radiant light to retreat so the two could set off. While the 7-colored light covered the mountain valley, no one was able to move and could only hide behind nearby void cracks. Yang Kai silently kept track of time. Finally, the sound of a deep inhalation from the depths of the mountain valley sounded, and along with a slight rumbling, the 7-colored radiant light receded like a great tide. Sect Master, be careful, Guizhou entreated. Yang Kai nodded before immediately setting off in the opposite direction Guizhou took. After separating from Guizhou, Yang Kai's speed became much faster. Even though he was much safer while acting with Guizhou, Yang Kai still had to constantly warn Guizhou when to change directions to avoid void cracks, slowing Yang Kai's progress slightly. Now, this wasn't a concern. In the Medicine Valley, medicinal fragrances were everywhere, so it was quite simple to find these precious herbs. Just by following the flow of medicinal fragrances, one could reap gains. The only thing to worry about was the existence of void cracks and the 7-colored radiant light. But Yang Kai estimated that since the 7-colored radiant light had just retreated, it would not appear again for some time, so he acted boldly. After a stick of incense, he squatted happily beside the roots of a towering tree to pluck a ginseng-like root. This root did not appear any different from ordinary ginseng besides its glimmering red glow, making it look like a red starry sky that had been shrunk down countless times. Red Star Ginseng, this really is a good place, Yang Kai muttered. All of the herbs he had acquired so far were Origin King grade, and each was a rare, if not extinct treasure. These herbs could be used to refine Origin King grade spirit pills that even Origin Kings would desperately fight for. Yang Kai was on the verge of another breakthrough, so these herbs were incredibly useful for his future cultivation. This trip to the Severed World had provided him with such a rare opportunity to collect herbs, so he certainly spared no effort. After half a stick of incense worth of time, Yang Kai was already 300 kilometers away as he frowned at a patch of spirit grass in front of him and some disturbed soil, cursing under his breath for being too late. The spirit medicine which grew in this place had already been harvested. The only spirit grass remaining was immature, so it would be useless even if it were to be collected. It seemed that the cultivator who came here before followed the principle of not killing the chicken which laid the eggs. This person took away the mature spirit medicines while leaving behind the seedlings, a courtesy to future generations. It was not clear who this person was, but after a moment of grumbling, Yang Kai simply shook his head and began tracing the next medicinal fragrance which stimulated his nose. Another stick of incense worth of time passed before Yang Kai finally gained something, and although this herb was inferior to the divine nirvana fruit and demon melting iris, it was still an invaluable treasure one could not buy even if they had enough money. It should be time soon, Yang Kai muttered to himself. According to his previous estimates, the period of time between when the seven-colored radiant peacock inhaled and exhaled was roughly half an hour. If this calculation was accurate, the seven-colored radiant light would soon flood the mountain valley again. Yang Kai could not be sure about his speculation, though, as he had yet to verify it. Just to be cautious, Yang Kai began paying attention to the locations of nearby void cracks as he continued his search. Suddenly, he turned his head to look in one direction as he sensed something. He noticed that there was a life aura quickly approaching from about 30 kilometers away, and after some quick checking, he realized that this aura was quite familiar and muttered, "Oh, it's her." Understanding this, Yang Kai did not try to avoid this newcomer and instead turned towards them in order to greet her. A moment later, a figure appeared nearby. Yang Kai raised his voice and called out, "Senior Luo." Luo Lan had also discovered Yang Kai some time ago, which was why she was flying over towards him, constantly releasing her divine sense in order to scan for void cracks in her path. Luo Lan smiled when she heard Yang Kai's voice and increased her speed. "Wait," Yang Kai shouted suddenly. Luo Lan stopped immediately and asked, "What's wrong? Is there a void crack in front of me?" Yang Kai nodded, "Yes. If you go forward 5 steps, you'll touch it." Luo Lan's pretty face paled slightly as she felt some slight fear, staring towards the space in front of her as she asked, "Here." You'll be fine if you move a meter to either side," Yang Kai instructed. Luo Lan moved cautiously, following Yang Kai's directions as she flew over to his side, saying when she arrived, "Many thanks. If you had not reminded me just now, I'm afraid I'd have already lost my head." "A minor matter, Senior doesn't need to worry about it," Yang Kai smiled lightly. "By the way, why are you here alone?" Luo Lan looked at Yang Kai and asked curiously. She had clearly seen Yang Kai enter the Medicine Valley with Guizhu before, but now, Guizhu was nowhere to be seen. "That's what I was about to ask," Yang Kai chuckled. "I acted separately from Senior Guizhu so that we could have greater gains, but what about Senior Luo? Why aren't you together with Senior Ni?" "For the same reason," Luo Lan said with a smile. "Following him, I was not able to obtain anything good, so I decided to take a chance and explore on my own. Although I have had some gains so far, it seems that the reason I haven't gotten into trouble yet was merely luck." If it had not been for Yang Kai's warning just now, she definitely would have struck that void crack head-on, and the consequences would have been disastrous. Thinking she might have passed by countless invisible void cracks so far, Luo Lan broke out into a cold sweat. As the two talked, the sound of a great exhalation came from the depths of the Medicine Valley. Yang Kai and Luo Lan, who had already experienced this phenomenon before, obviously knew what it meant and what they had to do. Seems my estimates were right, Yang Kai thought secretly. Every time the divine bird breathed, it would take about half an hour to complete a cycle. While he was thinking about this matter, Luo Lan turned her head around to try to find a place to hide. Unfortunately, there were no visible void cracks nearby, so with no other choice, she could only turn to Yang Kai. She did not show any panic though. After all, she was certain there were hidden void cracks here that could be used to avoid the 7-colored radiant light, it's just that she couldn't find them. "Senior, come here," Yang Kai said without any hesitation, beckoning to Luo Lan as he stood behind a nearby void crack, but in the next moment, Yang Kai's expression cramped up. "Ah. What's wrong?" Luo Lan stood in front of Yang Kai and asked as she saw an awkward look appear on his face. "This void crack." Yang Kai looked embarrassed, "It's a bit small." Small? Luo Lan was confused at first but quickly realized what Yang Kai was trying to say. Since the void crack was small, there would not be much room for the two of them to hide. If a man and a woman were forced into a small space, it was inevitable they would have some physical contact. Considering this, Luo Lan's expression also became a little awkward. Although she was many times older than Yang Kai, she was still a woman, and a beautiful one who appeared no older than her 30s at that. "It's fine, we only need to hide here for a while," Luo Lan calmed her mind and said. She shuffled closer to Yang Kai, leaving only half a meter or so between them before she looked over at Yang Kai and asked, "Can I stand here?" Yang Kai shook his head. Luo Lan gave a dry laugh as she realized that this void crack was really quite small. At that moment, the 7-colored radiant light suddenly flooded out, quickly blanketing the Medicine Valley. In the blink of an eye, the wall of light rushed towards the void crack in front of Yang Kai and Luo Lan like a great flood.